The question is not whether partners share everything, it is whether a behavior expands mutual choice or quietly replaces it with proof, fear, and avoidance.
Yeah, and I mean, that is where this entire discussion just becomes incredibly real for, anyone listening right now.
Right.
Because if you just look at the landscape of your daily life, the modern tools you rely on, the phones in your pocket, the location sharing apps constantly running in the background,
Oh, yeah, totally.
and increasingly artificial intelligence mediating your conversations. Those tools just completely blur the line. We are constantly forced to evaluate whether these behaviors, these technologies, are genuinely making us feel safe and connected, or if we're just, using them to quietly police the people we love.
Is this reassurance, control, or avoidance?
I mean, that is the defining question of modern intimacy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to look at a massive stack of sources today. We are pulling from smartphone privacy surveys, AI relationship studies, sociological research on family dynamics, and longitudinal data on cohabitation.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It really is. And the goal here is to help you, yes, you listening right now, navigate the incredibly complex, often really messy boundaries of modern relationships. We aren't here to take sides, and we certainly aren't here to tell you what to do.
Exactly, yeah. No judgment here.
Right, we just want to look at the evidence and figure out how we negotiate intimacy when the rules of engagement seem to, change every single time there's a software update or a major life transition.
It really is a fascinating landscape, too.
Yeah.
Because the sheer volume of access we have to each other now, it forces us to confront boundaries that previous generations just never even had to conceptualize.
I mean, 50 years ago, if your partner left for work, they were simply gone.
Right, gone until they walked back through the door at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Today, you can track their commute, you can see what music they're listening to on a shared Spotify account, and you know exactly when they read your last text message.
And that level of access creates this bizarre paradox.
Hmm.
On one hand, sharing your location or, giving your partner the passcode to your phone, it can be offered as this really beautiful, vulnerable act of care.
Definitely.
But on the flip side, it can incredibly easily be demanded as a kind of digital proof of loyalty.
Which means the smartphone has basically become the ultimate battlefield for relationship boundaries.
It's the primary arena. Absolutely. And to understand what's actually happening on that battlefield, we really have to look at how humans fundamentally understand privacy.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of that.
So there's this framework in communication studies. It's called Communication Privacy Management Theory, or CPM. And the foundational premise of CPM is that individuals inherently believe they own their private information.
Like it's physical property.
Yes, exactly. You own your texts, your whereabouts, your search history. But the moment you share that information, say by handing over your phone passcode, the person receiving it goes from being an outsider to becoming a co-owner of that information.
Okay, so if I give my partner my passcode so they can, I don't know, change the song while I'm driving,
Right.
I'm not just giving them a tool for convenience. According to this theory, I am deputizing them as a co-owner of everything inside that device.
You are. Which means you now share the responsibility of managing it.
Oh, wow.
That's the crux of it right there. When you become co-owners of private information, the theory states that you must negotiate mutually agreeable privacy rules about how that information is handled going forward.
But nobody actually does that.
No, exactly. The tension arises because most couples never actually have that negotiation. They share the passcode for convenience to change a song, but they don't define the rules of ownership.
So it's just assumed.
Right. And when those unspoken rules are broken, like when one person assumes the passcode means they can just casually read the other's emails, you get what researchers call boundary turbulence.
Boundary turbulence. I love that. That's a very polite academic way of describing, the massive fight that happens at 2 a.m. when someone gets caught snooping.
It really is.
But what's really interesting here is how our society defines that turbulence. Because if we look at the data from the Norton survey on digital privacy and relationships, the nuance is wild. People have very contradictory views on this.
They absolutely do.
The data shows that sharing a streaming password or a phone PIN is widely considered completely normal. We're talking almost 80% of people approving of it and participating in it.
Yeah, totally standard behavior now.
But active snooping like checking search histories or reading direct messages without explicit permission is overwhelmingly viewed as toxic and unacceptable by those exact same people.
Which points to a critical psychological distinction. The survey data really reveals that people view the capacity for access very, very differently than the exercise of that access.
Okay, let me try to put an analogy to this just to ground it. Because I think a lot of people listening might be thinking, well, if you trust someone completely, shouldn't they have total access?
Right, the I have nothing to hide argument.
Exactly. It feels like giving someone a key to your house. You give them the key because you trust them to come in. But what the survey data seems to suggest is that giving someone the house key is an invitation, right? It's an act of vulnerability.
Yes.
But if that person uses the key to come in and then installs hidden cameras inside every single room of your house to monitor what you do when they aren't looking, that entirely changes the nature of the access.
Oh, perfectly said.
The key was trust. The hidden camera is surveillance.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism at play here. The mechanism of how the access is utilized is what dictates whether it feels like care or control. It is not about having the key. It's about the expectation of privacy within the house itself.
Right.
The mere presence of trust doesn't somehow eradicate the human need for autonomy and, unmonitored space.
Which connects directly to the research on location sharing, right? I mean, there was a time when tracking someone's location was something only the CIA did in movies. And now it's just a built-in feature on literally every smartphone. But the research points out that location sharing isn't inherently good or bad. It's highly dependent on the parameters the couple sets.
It is. The evidence specifically highlights that partners need to actively discuss consent, the scope of the tracking, and the perceived intrusion. And we should definitely note here that we are drawing an inference from the research on this point.
Right. We need to be clear about that.
Yes. The data isn't claiming that location sharing outright causes relationship failure, but the inference is that the scope and the continuity of the tracking drastically alter how intrusive the behavior feels to the person being tracked.
Okay, let's break down those two variables, scope and continuity. Because if I'm understanding the mechanism correctly, the difference between care and control lies in the duration and the breadth of the monitoring.
Precisely. Let's look at broad and continuous monitoring first. If you have a 24/7 GPS tracker on your partner and you are checking it randomly throughout the day just to see if they're actually at the office, that is continuous continuity and massive scope.
It's the hidden camera.
It is the hidden camera. It creates a much, much higher perception of intrusion. You aren't checking it because they are in physical danger. You're checking it to manage your own internal anxiety about what they might be doing.
Right, but contrast that with a temporary limited scope scenario. Let's say my partner is driving home late at night on icy roads, and they drop a pin to share their location for the next hour just so I know they got home safely. That feels entirely different.
Completely different.
Because the continuity is limited to 1 hour. The scope is limited to a specific safety concern. It's offered proactively as an act of care rather than being demanded as this continuous audit of their life.
And that auditing behavior is exactly what erodes the foundation of a relationship over time. Because as the survey pointed out, a significant portion of people who engage in active snooping justify their actions. They claim they are trying to build trust or that they're simply looking for reassurance because they're, concerned about infidelity.
They think they're doing the relationship a favor.
They do. But the psychological reality is that sneaking around to find proof of loyalty doesn't actually build trust. Trust is the comfort with the unknown. Snooping is the desperate attempt to eliminate the unknown.
Wow. Trust is comfort with the unknown.
Right. So rather than building trust, snooping just feeds a self-perpetuating anxiety loop. You check once, you find nothing, you feel temporary relief. And then a few days later, the anxiety returns, demanding another check.
It's literally an addiction to reassurance, but the reassurance is completely hollow because it was obtained covertly. So if someone is listening to this right now and realizing that maybe they and their partner have been operating in this weird gray area, maybe they share locations all the time, but it secretly bothers one of them, or they have each other's passcodes but feel weird about it, what's the practical step here?
The practical step is recognizing that you cannot rely on implicit assumptions. You cannot just hand over a device that contains your entire digital life and assume you both share the exact same boundaries regarding its use.
You actually have to talk about it.
You have to sit down and explicitly write out, or at least verbally agree to, a consent-based privacy agreement. Define the scope and the continuity. Are we sharing locations all day, every day, or just when someone is traveling? Is your phone an open book, or is the passcode strictly for medical emergencies?
So you have to actually have the awkward conversation. You have to name the boundary. Like, hey, you can use my phone to order food on Uber Eats, but please don't read my group chats with my friends. Naming the boundary prevents the turbulence.
Exactly. It creates a predictable environment where both partners feel safe and respected.
But this false sense of intimacy that comes from digital access, this feeling that we are constantly connected just because I can see your dot on a map or text you constantly, it can actually set a trap.
It really can.
Because it creates this illusion of deep alignment that can accelerate physical milestones. Couples feel so close digitally that they rush into structural commitments, which brings us to a completely different type of boundary, moving from digital space to physical space, living together.
Ah, cohabitation.
Yes, because cohabitation is a massive step, but the research shows it can often serve as a blanket that hides completely mismatched future plans.
Cohabitation research is a uniquely revealing area of sociology because it shows that living together is not one uniform state of relationship commitment.
It looks the same on the outside, but it's not.
Exactly. When we look at the data, and I want to be super clear here, we are looking at this impartially to understand the mechanisms. We are not ranking marriage as morally superior to cohabitation.
Right, no moral judgments here, just looking at what the data says about why people move in together.
Right. The research clearly distinguishes between two very different underlying drivers for moving in together: mutual dedication versus practical constraints or inertia.
Okay, let's really pull those two concepts apart. Dedication versus constraint. Because on the surface, two couples moving in together might look exactly the same. They're both going to IKEA, they're buying a couch together, they're signing a lease. But the internal architecture of those choices is entirely different.
The internal architecture is what dictates the long-term survival of the relationship. So dedication is the genuine internal desire to prioritize the partnership. It's a proactive, forward-looking choice to build a shared future. It involves an identity shift, moving from an I mentality to a we mentality.
Okay, so that's the healthy, chosen side. What about constraint?
Constraint refers to the external pressures and barriers that make breaking up difficult, costly, or logistically complicated.
Right, constraints are the sticky things. A signed 12-month lease, adopting a dog together, integrating your friend groups, or honestly, just the sheer financial nightmare of having to break a lease, buy all new furniture, and find a new apartment in a terrible housing market.
Yes, and those constraints lead to a well-documented psychological and sociological phenomenon known as sliding versus deciding. When couples slide into cohabitation, driven primarily by constraints rather than a mutual dedication to a long-term future, they enter a highly volatile danger zone.
But I want to push back on this for a second because we have to acknowledge the reality of the world people are living in right now. Rent is astronomical.
Oh, absolutely.
The cost of living is crushing. So if you are dating someone and you're already spending 4 nights a week at their place and one of your leases is up, isn't convenience a perfectly logical, responsible reason to move in together?
Right.
Sharing the burden makes rational economic sense.
It is entirely logical from a financial perspective. The economy undeniably forces couples into these situations, but the financial logic doesn't negate the psychological mechanism of what happens to the relationship itself.
Okay, so what actually happens?
When constraints outweigh dedication, cohabitation acts as a mask. It covers up a fundamental lack of alignment regarding where the relationship is actually going.
How does it mask it, though? Walk me through the mechanism of that inertia.
It comes down to cognitive dissonance. Human beings are deeply uncomfortable holding two conflicting beliefs. So if you move in with someone purely for financial reasons, but you aren't sure you want to marry them or be with them forever, your brain struggles with the fact that you just took a massive step, typically associated with lifelong commitment.
Right, you're sleeping in the same bed every night, but you aren't sure if you even want to be with them in 5 years.
Exactly.
Yep.
So to resolve that dissonance, you subconsciously convince yourself, well, we live together, so we must be deeply committed. You begin to mistake the friction of the constraints for the gravity of love.
Wow. You mistake the friction of the constraints for the gravity of love.
Okay.
That is incredibly heavy. So you think you are choosing to stay because you're devoted, but really you're just staying because the structural barriers to leaving are too high.
Yes.
It's like you're on a conveyor belt. You stepped onto the belt because you were tired of walking, to save money on rent. But now the belt is just moving you toward marriage or long-term enmeshment, and you aren't actually steering anymore.
The conveyor belt is the perfect visualization of inertia. And because breaking up now involves such massive structural upheaval, People often stay in relationships that have lost their spark, or relationships that are frankly subtly toxic, purely because of the constraints. The mechanism of inertia quietly replaces the mechanism of mutual choice.
So if someone is listening right now and they are looking at their partner's lease that is expiring next month and they are having that conversation about moving in together to save money, how do they avoid the conveyor belt? What is the viewer value here?
You have to force the issue of choice. You must transition from sliding to deciding by naming the decision out loud.
Name the decision.
Right. If you are moving in primarily for financial convenience, you need to have the bravery to say that explicitly. Like,
Yeah.
we are moving in together because it makes financial sense right now, but we are not officially deciding that this is a forever commitment yet.
So you have to strip away the romance of the milestone and be brutally honest about the logistics?
Exactly. And more importantly, you need to establish a mutually agreed timeline to evaluate the relationship's future without the pressure of the lease.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah. You agree to sit down in 6 months and actively discuss whether the dedication is growing to match the constraints. Make cohabitation an active, heavily discussed choice rather than a passive slide into a shared living room.
It requires immense bravery to name that decision, honestly, because you might initiate a conversation that reveals your partner is on a completely different page.
Which is terrifying.
It is. But it is vastly better to discover that misalignment before you sign the lease than to wake up 5 years later trapped by inertia.
100%.
Okay, so we've talked about the physical walls of an apartment and how those constraints can trap you, but sometimes the boundaries you have to navigate aren't physical at all. Sometimes the people constraining your relationship don't even live in your house. Which brings us to the third, often invisible presence in modern relationships.
The family of origin.
Yes, your parents, your siblings, the family dynamics you were raised in. The problem here is that family help, family closeness, or even just family communication habits can very easily mutate into a third voice that holds perceived veto power over your relationship.
To understand how this happens, we rely on Bowen family systems theory. This is a foundational framework in family therapy that posits we do not enter romantic relationships as blank slates.
Right.
We import deeply ingrained scripts from our childhoods. These learned scripts dictate how we handle privacy, how we manage conflict, how we express affection, and crucially, how we draw boundaries between ourselves and others.
It's like you're bringing an entirely different emotional operating system into the relationship. You don't even realize you have it running in the background until your partner does something that triggers it, and suddenly your inherited script is like attacking their communication style.
The emotional operating system is a great way to conceptualize it because these scripts operate almost entirely subconsciously. We just assume our family's way of doing things is the normal way. If you grew up in a highly enmeshed family where privacy was viewed as secrecy and everyone knew everyone else's business, you will naturally bring that expectation of total transparency into your romantic partnership. And you'll expect your partner to be totally transparent with your family as well.
And that is exactly where the boundary turbulence hits a critical level. Let's look at the fever model of disclosure, because I think this perfectly illustrates it.
Yeah, let's look at that.
Say, one partner has a deeply ingrained habit of calling their mother every single time the couple has a disagreement. They have a fight about doing the dishes or finances, the anxiety spikes, they feel the fever, so they immediately call their mom to vent and lower their own emotional temperature.
Very common scenario.
In that partner's mind, they are just following their family script. They are seeking support. But to the romantic partner, who perhaps grew up in a family that valued stoicism and internal problem solving, this feels like a massive, unforgivable breach of the couple's private boundary.
It is a breach because by bringing the parents into the couple's private boundary, you are functionally creating a covert triad. The dyad, the two romantic partners, is no longer isolated. And suddenly, the parents' opinions, their judgments, or their anxieties become a third voice in the room.
Right, and it becomes particularly complex when constraints are added to this dynamic. Like, if the parents are providing significant financial support...
Oh, money changes everything.
Right, maybe they helped with the down payment on the couple's house, or they pay for the grandchildren's schooling. That third voice can start to feel like it holds authoritative veto power over the couple's autonomous choices. The strings attached to the support become chains around the relationship's decision-making process.
Absolutely.
But hearing all of this, I have to ask a slightly fatalistic question. If we are running on these subconscious scripts and our parents' unresolved issues are dictating our boundary disputes, I mean, does this mean we are doomed? If you had a dysfunctional family of origin, are you just destined to repeat those patterns and sabotage your own romantic life?
It's crucial that we look at the data objectively here. And I want to be explicitly clear. We're not diagnosing anyone listening, and we are not suggesting you blame your parents for your current relationship struggles.
Right, no blame, just looking at the patterns.
Exactly. The evidence shows that family of origin patterns are associated with later romantic functioning. There are correlations,
Mhm.
but association is not destiny. These are learned scripts, and the defining characteristic of a script is that it can be rewritten. Awareness of the pattern is the mechanism that allows you to break it.
So it's not a life sentence, it's just a starting condition? You can choose to write a different operating manual for your own relationship. So what does that actually look like in practice? How do you practically rewrite that script when your family is pushing a little too hard into your relationship's business?
You have to actively protect the core of the relationship, the primary dyad, by creating a unified front. You and your partner need to sit down in a moment of calm and create one couple-first boundary sentence.
Couple first boundary sentence.
Yes, you agree on the exact phrasing in advance, so that in the heat of the moment, neither of you has to improvise. When the family influence oversteps, you both utilize the exact same sentence.
Give me an example of what that sentence sounds like. Like if my mom is asking invasive questions about when we're having kids.
It should be respectful, but unyielding. Something like, "We really appreciate your advice, and we know you care about us, but we are making this decision together, just the two of us."
We are making this decision together. It is polite, but it instantly draws a circle around the couple and places the parents firmly on the outside.
It reinforces that the primary allegiance is to the partner, not the family of origin.
Okay, so we've looked at being physically close and enmeshed, both with a partner in a shared apartment and with the sprawling influence of a family system. But let's explore the exact opposite end of the spectrum. What happens to the boundaries of control, reassurance, and avoidance when a move or a sudden work change forces a couple apart?
You're talking about long-distance relationships, or LDRs, and this is a dynamic that is becoming incredibly prevalent.
It's all everywhere.
Right. Between the rise of remote work policies, globalized career paths, military deployments, and people moving back home for family caregiving, couples are frequently finding themselves geographically separated. And the core problem that emerges when distance is introduced is a shift in how the couple coordinates their lives.
Yeah.
The danger is that logistical planning and operational check-ins can very easily replace genuine emotional coordination.
I've seen this happen to so many friends. When you live together, intimacy is often ambient, You are just around each other. But when you are apart, you have to schedule every single interaction.
Yes.
So your phone calls stop being about your feelings and they become these dry status updates like, did you call the landlord? How was the flight? What time is your meeting tomorrow? Okay, love you, bye. It feels like the relationship goes into safe mode, only running the most basic, necessary functions to keep the thing from crashing.
Safe mode is a brilliant way to describe it. To understand how to get out of safe mode and survive the distance, we have to look at how communication scholars deconstruct intimacy. They break it down into 4 distinct domains.
Okay.
When you are geographically close, these domains blend together seamlessly. You don't even have to think about them. But when you are separated, you have to actively and intentionally cultivate each one.
Let's spend some time on this because I think understanding these 4 domains is the key to surviving any kind of separation. What are they?
The first domain is imagined intimacy. This is the cognitive and creative side of the relationship. It's how you mentally simulate your partner's presence when they aren't there.
Like daydreaming.
Sort of, but more intentional. It could be listening to a playlist they curated for you, looking at a photo on your desk, or holding on to a piece of clothing that smells like them. It's the psychological work of keeping their memory active and vivid in your daily environment.
So it's actively choosing to keep their ghost in the room with you rather than just compartmentalizing them until the next phone call. What's the second domain?
The second is embodied intimacy. This is obviously the most difficult across a distance, but it's about maintaining a sense of physical connection and engaging the senses.
Which is hard through a screen.
It is. A text message is just cold data on a screen. But sending a physical care package or handwritten letter introduces texture, weight, and smell. Or even leaving a long, unedited video message instead of a text, so your partner can read your microexpressions and see your body language. It's about finding proxies for physical presence.
That makes total sense. You have to give them something to hold, not just something to read. And the third?
The third is emotional intimacy. This is the domain most people think of when they hear the word intimacy. It is the sharing of your internal state, your fears, your hopes, your insecurities, your vulnerabilities. It's the deep late-night conversations.
And the fourth.
The fourth domain is intimate knowledge. This is distinct from emotional intimacy. Intimate knowledge is keeping up to date with the mundane, granular details of their life. Knowing what time they usually wake up, knowing they have a conflict with a specific coworker, knowing they're fighting a mild cold. It's the texture of their daily routine.
But looking at all the effort required to maintain those four domains, I mean, honestly, doesn't moving away automatically put a relationship on a path toward failure? Sometimes distance feels like a structural form of avoidance. Like if you really wanted to build a life with someone, you wouldn't take the job 3,000 miles away.
That is a very common societal assumption, but the research specifically refutes that fatalistic view. And we must be careful not to generalize one study to every single remote work or long-distance couple out there.
Right.
But the evidence highlights that relocation brings both severe stressors and unique, often overlooked rewards. The data shows that distance, in and of itself, is not inherently a deficiency.
What possible rewards could come from being separated from the person you love?
The primary reward is intentionality. The mechanism here is that the lack of shared physical context forces deeper verbal disclosure. When you are sitting on the couch together watching television, you might feel a sense of ambient closeness, but you aren't actually communicating.
Right, you're just existing in the same room.
Exactly. When you are separated by thousands of miles and you only have an hour on the phone, you can't rely on ambient closeness.
Yeah.
You are forced to articulate your internal states. You have to use words to bridge the gap. Many couples report that the distance actually forced them to build a stronger, more articulate foundation of trust and communication because they had no other choice. They had to learn how to talk to each other.
The stressor of the distance forces the reward of better communication. But that only happens if the couple actively manages it.
Exactly. The mechanism is that the stressors and the rewards of the distance need to be constantly renegotiated. You cannot just put the relationship on autopilot. You have to engage in what sociologists refer to as time work. You have to fiercely protect and prioritize your synchronized time together against the demands of your separate physical lives.
So for the listener who is staring down the barrel of a 6-month work assignment in another state, or maybe they are currently feeling the drift in a long-distance relationship, what is the actionable way to perform that time work?
You must establish a non-negotiable weekly reconnection ritual that is strictly off-limits to logistics.
No, talking about the bills.
None.
Yeah.
It cannot be a time where you discuss the mortgage or coordinate flight schedules or vent about your boss. It has to be dedicated, protected time where you actively choose to explore those four domains of intimacy we just talked about. You use that time for emotional disclosure or shared activities over video. You have to actively choose each other, not just update each other.
You have to protect the time work. But, if distance forces us to rely entirely on digital communication, on texts, on video calls, on messaging apps to maintain our intimacy, we eventually run into the strangest boundary of all. Because what happens when we invite a machine to mediate that intimate communication?
Yeah.
Let's talk about artificial intelligence.
This is the absolute frontier of modern relationship research, and it is moving at breakneck speed. We have completely moved beyond algorithmic matchmaking on dating apps. We are now looking at generative AI large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, and others being used as active intermediaries in human-to-human romantic communication.
The sheer scope of the problem here is wild to conceptualize. People are utilizing AI for highly emotional tasks. They are using it to draft apologies to their partners. They're using it to soften the tone of a harsh text message. Some are even using it to figure out how to break up with someone.
It's everywhere.
And the danger is that a polished, perfectly empathetic, intimate message can completely conceal who the real author is. Or worse, it can be used to entirely avoid doing the messy, difficult work of having a hard conversation.
Which brings up profound, unprecedented ethical and relational questions. We are dealing with questions of authorship, disclosure, emotional labor, agency, and consent. And again, to maintain our objective stance on the data, the research clearly states that using AI to assist in communication does not automatically prove betrayal.
Right, it's not cheating just because you used an app to check your tone.
Exactly. An LLM is fundamentally a tool, but it is a tool that structurally mutates the relationship into what researchers identify as a covert triad.
A covert triad. Okay, we mentioned a triad earlier with the parents, but explain the mechanics of the covert triad in the context of AI because it sounds incredibly deceptive.
It's a fascinating sociological concept, phenomenologically meaning how the interaction appears on the surface to the people experiencing it. The text exchange looks entirely dyadic. It looks like a private one-on-one conversation between two romantic partners.
Just you and me texting.
Right. But operationally, beneath the surface, there was a third party involved. A large language model generating the text. And the crucial defining part of the covert triad is that this third party is visible only to the sender and entirely hidden from the receiver.
So my partner reads this beautifully crafted, incredibly self-aware, deeply empathetic apology text, and they think, wow, he really gets it. He did the emotional work. He's so in touch with his feelings. But what they don't know is that all I did was type, my girlfriend is mad I forgot our anniversary, make me sound really sorry and emotionally mature, into a prompt box and copied the output.
Exactly. And this scenario introduces a massive structural shift in how we understand emotional labor within relationships. Historically, if we look at sociologist Arlie Hochschild's foundational theory, emotional labor was conceptualized as a single continuous accomplishment. You feel the raw emotion, and then you do the grueling cognitive work to express it appropriately to the other person.
Right.
But AI fundamentally bifurcates. It splits that labor in two distinct parts.
It splits the labor. How? Walk me through the mechanism of that split.
It divides it into feeling labor and articulation labor. Feeling labor is the internal physiological state. You genuinely feel guilty that you forgot the anniversary. That feeling belongs entirely to you. You own it.
Okay, the feeling is mine.
But articulation labor is the work of converting that raw, messy feeling into coherent, empathetic words that your partner can actually receive and process well. By using generative AI, you retain the feeling labor, but you entirely outsource the articulation labor to the machine.
It's exactly like hiring a ghostwriter for your apologies or a ghostwriter for your love letters. But this raises a philosophical question. If the feelings underneath the prompt are real, like, if I really do love you and I genuinely feel terrible that I hurt you, does it actually matter who wrote the words? If the outcome is that my partner feels understood and the conflict is resolved, is using a ghostwriter really a betrayal?
That tension is the exact debate happening in sociological research right now. We are watching the very definition of authenticity shift in real time. Historically, authenticity in a romantic context was inextricably tied to linguistic authorship. Did you, with your own brain and your own vocabulary, write these words?
Right.
But now, as these tools become ubiquitous, some users argue that authenticity is simply about emotional ownership. They argue, I own the genuine feeling behind the text, so the message is authentic, regardless of who polished the grammar.
But the receiving partner, the person reading the ghostwritten apology, might have a very different definition of authenticity.
And the data shows they frequently do. The sense of betrayal and the breach of trust usually doesn't stem from the AI's involvement itself. It stems from the lack of transparency. The covert nature of the triad is what inflicts the damage. When a receiver eventually discovers that they have been pouring their heart out, making themselves completely vulnerable to an algorithm's phrasing, they feel deeply deceived. It violates their agency in the conversation, and it violates their consent. They consented to an intimate exchange with their partner, not a machine. The mechanism of trust in this new landscape depends entirely on agreed disclosure.
So how do couples navigate this entirely new frontier? What is the practical advice for someone who maybe struggles with communication and just wants a little algorithmic help phrasing a difficult text so they don't start a fight?
The most vital thing is that you cannot make unilateral assumptions about what your partner considers authentic. You and your partner must explicitly agree on what level of AI assistance is acceptable in your specific relationship.
So you have to talk about how you talk.
You have to have a meta conversation about communication. Is it okay to use AI to check grammar and tone? Is it okay to use it to draft a difficult email to a landlord, but strictly off limits for resolving an emotional argument between the two of you? You must proactively agree what assistance is private, what is shared, and what is considered completely off limits.
You have to agree on the boundaries of the ghostwriter before you hire one. Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground. We've navigated the surveillance tracking on our phones. We've untangled the deep subconscious scripts of our families. We've crossed the logistics of long distances. And we've even brought artificial intelligence into the bedroom.
It's a lot.
It is. Let's bring it back down to earth to wrap up our thematic journey. Let's say you survive all of this. You set the boundaries, you define the AI rules, the relationship is incredibly stable, you live together peacefully, but you wake up one day, look across the kitchen table, and the spark just seems completely gone.
Ah, the quiet phase. This is arguably one of the most complex and universally misunderstood phases in the life cycle of any long-term partnership. The fundamental problem is that a sense of emotional flatness or a prolonged lack of intense passion can be completely misread by the couple experiencing it.
How do they misread it?
They usually misread it in one of two extreme ways.
Yeah.
Some people misread the flatness as absolute permanent safety. They get completely complacent. They assume that because there is no conflict, the relationship is indestructible, and they stop trying entirely.
And the other extreme.
The other extreme is that couples misread the quiet phase as a final, fatal verdict. They believe that because the fireworks have stopped, the love is dead, and the relationship has fundamentally failed.
Right, because we are entirely conditioned by popular culture, movies, and social media to believe that love is this state of perpetual burning intensity. If there aren't grand gestures and fireworks every single day, we assume something is horribly broken. But the longitudinal evidence tells a very different story about how love actually operates over time.
It does. Longitudinal research on relationship and sexual satisfaction provides us with a much-needed developmental perspective. Relationships are not static. The evidence shows that desire and relationship satisfaction actually change together over time in a bidirectional loop. They deeply influence each other, and they naturally ebb and flow. A quiet phase or a season of emotional flatness is absolutely not automatic proof that a relationship is over.
Let's explore that bidirectional loop, meaning if I am feeling deeply satisfied and secure in the relationship emotionally, I might feel a higher level of desire for my partner.
Yes.
And if we have a great physical connection, that subsequently increases my emotional satisfaction. But those things are subjected to the friction of daily life, right? They
Hey.
fluctuate based on stress.
Exactly. Relationships breathe. They expand and they contract. They have seasons of intense, consuming passion, and they have seasons of quiet, logistical companionship. The mechanism is that desire and satisfaction vary together, but they are constantly being battered by external factors. Things like financial stress, aging, career changes, having children, illnesses, and major life transitions.
But I want to push back on this because I can hear people listening who have been stuck in a sexless, quiet marriage for 5 years yelling at the speakers right now. If there's been no spark, no connection, and just pure flatness for months or years, isn't it just denial to stay? Aren't you just falling back into that exact same inertia we talked about in Chapter 2, letting the constraints keep you in a dead relationship?
It is a critical distinction to make, and it's a very fair question. But we have to look closely at the data. The research clearly outlines that a quiet phase is a natural fluctuation. If you immediately interpret a temporary lull in passion as a permanent death sentence, you risk premature relationship abandonment. You throw away a structurally sound partnership just because the weather changed.
Okay, but what if it's not a temporary lull?
Well, on the flip side, as you mentioned, if you ignore the flatness completely and just stay out of fear, avoidance, or inertia, you build a mountain of quiet resentment. The key paradigm shift is realizing that the flatness is not the verdict itself. The flatness is a diagnostic tool.
A diagnostic tool. I love that. It's like a check engine light on your dashboard.
Yeah.
When the light comes on, it doesn't mean the car is totaled and you have to abandon it on the side of the highway. It just means a specific system under the hood needs attention and maintenance.
That is the exact mechanism.
Right.
It's a signal that the emotional or physical system needs calibration, not that the entire vehicle needs to be scrapped.
So for the listener who is feeling that heavy, quiet flatness right now, the listener who is staring at their partner watching TV and wondering where the spark went, what is the actionable step to use that diagnostic tool effectively?
Do not accept the flatness as a final verdict. You have to take the anxiety of that internal realization and turn a verdict into a specific reconnection conversation. You have to name the quietness out loud. Say, I've been feeling a distance between us lately. I feel like we're operating on autopilot, and I want to find a way to bridge that gap together. It requires immense vulnerability because you are choosing to step toward them in the midst of uncertainty rather than pulling away in avoidance.
Turn the verdict into a conversation. Okay, let's unpack this entire journey. So what does this all mean for us? We have traveled from the hyper-vigilant tracking devices sitting in our pockets to the deep, subconsciously learned boundary scripts inherited from our childhoods. We've examined the mechanical differences between choosing a shared future and sliding into the inertia of a shared lease. We've looked at the intense emotional time work required to survive being 1,000 miles apart, how to navigate the surreal, unprecedented new world of AI ghostwriters mediating our apologies, and finally, how to survive the quiet, sparkless phases of long-term love without panicking.
And through all of these vastly different scenarios, from smartphones to cohabitation, we see recurring, undeniable themes of how we manage our boundaries, how we confront our fears, and how we define our commitments. Based on all the research we've synthesized today across all these domains, there are three distinct takeaways. Number one, care needs consent and room to say no. Number two, commitment needs a named choice, not silent inertia. And number three, connection is rebuilt through honest agreements, not surveillance or verdicts.
I want you to think about something as you go about the rest of your day. Think about the last time you reached for your phone to check on your partner. It could have been looking at their location on a map, or checking to see if they read your text, or even glancing at their screen when it lit up. In that brief fraction of a second before the screen unlocked, were you looking for a reason to connect with them, or were you looking for a reason to stop feeling anxious? The answer to that question might completely change how you view your own boundaries. If this conversation helped you separate reassurance, control, and avoidance, subscribe to AI Dialogue Lab, like, share, and turn on the bell.